Hello and welcome to Frank's School. I'm trying to teach you to love German and grammar. 12th day at it. I want to begin to talk about relative pronouns because one has appeared. I'm not sure this is the first one that's appeared, but one has appeared in the story. So I'm not going to go on with the story, but I'm going to show. And I had some confusion in my mind. Oh, my chalk. I had some confusion in my mind as I'll have to work without chalkies. As I was teaching yesterday, because, and that I can actually make that serve. The German that was there was, dass die goldene Kugel in der Königstochter nicht in ihr Händchen fiel, das sie in der Höhe gehalten hatte. Well, that means that the golden ball of the king's daughter, not into her handlet, fell, that she in the height held had. Love German. Now my confusion as I was teaching about this, I was thinking, I got confused. I was thinking that it was the ball that she had held in the height. Well, no, it was her little hand. It was her Händchen, and this would have been Hand. But it mutated because of the ending that made it small, the diminutive. And that is crystal clear in German, because the relative pronoun is right here, das, and that is neuter. That's neuter. If that she in the height had been the ball, well, then it would have been die sie in der Höhe gehalten hatte. So it's crystal clear. Now in English it would not be so clear. As a matter of fact, that's probably why I was getting confused. I was trying to speak English here. Because you'd say the word that. Boy, I need to chalk them. Now here's a piece. We would say that. And relative pronouns in English, the word that, which, who, whose, whom, I think there's five. But it doesn't show gender and it doesn't show number. We just use das, or we just use that. And for a while I was thinking that the antecedent of it was ball, because in German, in English it would be the same. But no, the antecedent is Händchen. Now, here are the relative pronouns. This is masculine, this is feminine, this is neuter, and they look so much like the definite articles. I know. Der die das. Der die das in German, boy. If you can get der die das under control, you're good. And I think you can. The problem for me is you really do have to know your genders. When you get a noun, you have to know what the gender is of the noun. And that's a harder business for me. But to actually, once you know the gender, to see how they work, that's just nothing but cool. Here's the plural. When you get to the plural, the genders disappear. This is nominative, subject of a sentence, subjective. This is genitive or possessive. This is dative, that to idea. And this is accusative, which is also to, but more directly to. Well, anyway, I use the Reed Kellogg, instead of just memorizing this chart, which would be one approach, I am not going to recommend that. I'm just going to keep going on in the story. And when we hit a relative pronoun, I'll point that relative pronoun out. Oh, and by the way, this function word, das, it makes in a relative clause, the verb tends to go at the end. So that the golden ball not of the king's daughter into her little hand fell, not fell. So there's the verb, the simple predicate, if you wish. It's all the way at the end of that relative clause. Now, if you don't, later on, maybe I won't do that today, but I think later on I'll show you that if you don't put the das in there, well, then you can get away with using what the Germans tend to like in their independent clauses, that is, the verbs in the second, or the simple predicates in the second position. But don't worry about that right now. That is kind of a special case. It's not really a relative pronoun. It's a function word is what I call it. All right, now I'm using Reed Kellogg to show what's going on here. Reed Kellogg, and I've taught all about that. I mean, I'm not going to give you the link right now, but if you wanted to learn how to do Reed Kellogg, it's all in Frank's school, the whole thing. I didn't do the whole sentence before because it didn't have room, but the ball, it fell into her hand. Well, it didn't fall, but the nicht would be here. Nicht. So anyway, the rest of it would go there. But now, here we've got what's in English called an adjective clause. The grammar that I was just looking at wants to call it a relative clause. It is a relative clause, but there's different kinds. Well, maybe there aren't. It's an adjective clause anyway because it answers which. It answers the question which about little hand. Which little hand? Well, that she held up in the height. That little hand. And I know something I started to say here. I'm backing up. I just read something very interesting for me. That the fact that the verb goes at the end in these relative clauses, that apparently is the old way it was done in German. It's said like Latin. Latin likes to put the verb at the very end of a sentence. Not always, but it likes to put it there. Well, I guess German once was like that too, way, way, way back. But now independent clauses, main clauses, they put it in that second position. That's changed. But in the relative clauses, the old way persists. I thought that was so interesting. I'm going to have to think about that a while. Well, anyway, into this diagram here, here's the relative pronoun. There's the relative pronoun. There's the relative pronoun. This is its antecedent. This is the word that this relative pronoun is replacing. She had held little hand in the height. So it's a pronoun that's taking the place of that. Now, what's so cool, it's cool anyway, in English, I mean, when you diagram it, you put the relative pronoun where it occurs in the syntax of the relative clause. You see, it's the direct object. She had held the hand. It's the direct object. So when you diagram it, you put it there. Well, since it's a direct object, it's going to be the accusative case. If you've ever wondered in English about when do you say who and when do you say whom, well, right here's the issue. But I'm not teaching English grammar right now, unless it serves me to get you to love German grammar. So there's the position. It's going to be the accusative case. Here's accusative. Now, if it had been the ball, then this would have been D. It still would have been accusative case. She had held the ball in the height. But now, since the ball is feminine, it would have been this one. And that's what I momentarily got a little bit confused on. There is no confusion in German. And, well, about this. And I also, I don't know how to approach this subject, but I wonder and wonder what it's like, what goes on in a mind that speaks a language, German isn't the only one, that speaks a language that is so knit together with agreement. In other words, this agrees with that. Gender and number of the antecedent are going to be taken by the relative pronoun. The gender and the number. The gender and the number. But the case, in other words, how it's, which one of these is it going to be, that's case. That depends on its position in the adjective clause, in the relative clause. Anyway, back to what I was saying. A language that has so much agreement, English has some agreement, certainly, but not nearly as much as German or Latin, my gosh. But also Spanish, Portuguese, the same is true. And you think differently when your sentence is when all that agreement is going on, it's like you think in bigger chunks. You only don't think about a noun, but the adjectives that go with it, or the pronoun that's going to take the place of it, it all goes together, united somehow by agreement. Now, obviously, English works, and I don't mean to diss English. English is a fine language, but it is relatively simple compared in grammar. But simple or complicated, what I'm talking about now is I have to wonder, and I don't know if it's ever been studied or ever could be figured out, if a mind doesn't operate differently. I had a slight sense that my mind was operating differently when I reached fluency in Portuguese, and would not dream of using a word that I'm not having my adjective agree with my noun. I just sort of thought as the whole thing as a package, where in English it's kind of word by word by word. I don't know, I wasn't very clear about that, but I wanted to say something about that at some point. All right, a little longer than I wanted. But anyway, I've introduced the idea of the relative pronouns. See you next time.